Okie dokie, everybody. Here we go. We are going live for our Astro-Babble on this lovely Monday morning. Good morning, everybody who is joining us on social media, or maybe you're watching the replay via Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. We are going live just like we do every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with 8 charts that have been donated by you, the followers. We have these 8 charts that I've plugged into my SolarFire Astro software, and we're basically just going to read them cold, talk about some astrology stuff, some themes that I like to see, give you a little bit of information, context, give you a little bit of a peek into other people's lives, and also hopefully drop some pearls of wisdom along the way. Good morning, Alex. Good morning, Del. Thank you for joining. As always, if you'd like to be a part of the live stream, just send me via private message your birth date, place, and exact birth time, and I will add you to the list. I did that all call last week. I received over 150 active charts as of this morning, so please be patient with me as we only do 8 every day, or every live stream. I can't do this every day, but not in addition to my regular client load. Okay, so let's pop open the fizzy water, take a sip, and we'll move on to Katie. So Katie was born at 8:02 p.m. in Westchester. Let's take a peek at Katie's chart. Oh, that's fun. So we have a Taurus ascendant ruled by Venus and Virgo in the 5th house, which is in a loose, but I'd still call it a grand Earth trine with conjoined by degree Uranus and Neptune in Capricorn in the 9th. All of them are within 1 degree of each other. That's pretty fabulous, Katie, I have to say. A Taurus ascendant really does complement the Venusian aspect of your Libra sun in the 6th. But that's an interesting dynamic. I can see how you're having some trouble with your own stubbornness there, because that Libra sun craves that balance, that equilibrium, that fairness. But that Taurus ascendant really just wants to make sure that we're steady, we're complete, that we're not rushing forward. However, the ruler of the chart is also that Venus in detriment. She is in Virgo, her least favorite sign in the 5th house. So there is this holding back that I think manifests between this Libra and this Taurus, both Venusian signs with the ruler of your chart and the ruler of your sun in this detrimental position in Virgo. I think we have some fun things to play with here, especially because you've chosen to put Mars in Scorpio and Mercury in Scorpio, as well as Pluto in Scorpio in the 7th house of relationships. Your spouse, should you choose to have one, is going to be very, very Scorpio, scarily Scorpio in some ways. That oozing of power that Scorpio tends to get when their placements are super, super strong. That's who you're attracted to in your charts. There is no messing around with somebody you choose to be a partner with. So that's for damn sure, Katie. But I think one of the interesting things about your chart is that you've put the ruler of your chart in the 5th house of creativity, sexuality, children, parents. The idea of you becoming a parent is very tied to your identity. But you also have this Sun in Libra, Jupiter in Libra in the 6th house of work, and this is where we find good chemistry between work-life balance, especially because that 22-degree Jupiter is making a trine to your 23-degree Saturn in Aquarius in the 10th. I think that there is really great synastry for you to have work-life balance. However, the issue then comes in with the spouse, because this Pluto and Scorpio in the 7th is making a square to that Saturn, and there is conflict balancing specifically your spouse's schedule with your work schedule with your children, and that's part of the dynamic. But you'd actually work very well with children. I would highly encourage some sort of field where you do get to not just play the parent at home, but also play the parent in your work dynamic, because you have this lovely moon in Cancer in the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, and that's a beautiful placement to have your moon in. It's also in its own sign, and for you to have your sun in the 6th house of work. Just the work placements with your parenting placements are very, very strong. You also have this lovely North Node in Sag in the 8th, so I think as you start to develop career-wise and you start to recognize your own strengths, there's a very strong possibility that you will then work with children in an entrepreneurial capacity. In some ways, maybe giving them the opportunity to succeed where you did not have that opportunity to succeed, and giving back to them in a way, especially if you're able to utilize your natural talents of that 3rd house, that writing, teaching, speaking house. What else do we see? I'm very puzzled by this Uranus-Neptune conjunction in Capricorn in the 9th. This can sometimes come off on a lower expression. Every planetary aspect has lower expressions and higher expressions. The idea of sometimes we get stuck in our own business and we don't allow the planets to fully express themselves, but then there is a strategic way that we can always kind of elevate the placement. And for you, I think that the harsher expression of this ascendant trine Venus, trine Neptune, Uranus, in the earth signs is you thinking that you know a lot more about subjects than you actually do. Just because you know how to be efficient does not mean that you've considered every option. Yeah, because the thing that earth signs are definitely prone to is ignorance via routine. And I think that that's something that is one of the major weaknesses of your chart, which is why, you have so many comfortable placements and so many placements about balance, but you can't have balance if you've decided that, oh, this data over here doesn't fit, therefore we're just going to leave it out of the study. Like, that's not appropriate, which is why you have this Scorpio spouse, this energy of Mars in Scorpio, Mercury Scorpio, Pluto Scorpio in the 7th house of relationships. You need to partner with somebody in your life who's able to actually dig deep into those mysterious areas that you refuse to venture in because they don't make you feel comfortable. And your chart is so much about preserving balance and comfort. Although, let's not get you wrong, I mean, a Venus in Virgo has rules up the butt, but at the same time, we need to respect that this 9th house Uranus-Neptune conjunction is the idea of you not being very receptive to new knowledge and relying on old knowledge in order to move forward, as opposed to considering options that are outside of your wheelhouse. So that's definitely something to understand from a weaknesses perspective. But yeah, I think that summarizes the chart pretty well. The parental component, spousal component, you receiving that balance via the workspace, preferably with some sort of teaching or education with children, and then working towards that North Node of entrepreneurship in the 8th house. Cool. Thank you, Katie, for jumping in. Laurel, Bob, thank you for watching on Facebook. Katie, welcome. We actually are just finishing with your chart, so you're going to have to watch the replay to get the back of it. But let's move on to our second chart. So we have Christy. Oh, and you are a teacher. That's hilarious. Lovely. Working with your placements, always a great thing. One thing that my clients always ask me is, Sam, am I doing the right line of work? And I say, you could be a janitor and exercise your placements just as much as the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. There are just going to be different industries and different professions that are more amicable to your strengths, but that doesn't mean that you being in a particular profession is against your nature. It just, like, you could work in technology Yeah, but you could work in customer services and technology and exercise your Cancer placements. You could work as a manager or a controller or an editor in technology and exercise your Virgo placements. You could have that CEO position and have your cardinal placements in Aries or Capricorn. Like, there are so many ways that you could potentially fulfill the promise of your chart, but it just depends on whether or not you feel oppressed in the unique position that you find yourself in within your career of choice. Okay. Moving on to Christy's chart. So Christy has Cancer ascendant, which puts her moon in Leo in the second as the ruler of her chart. It is a full moon in Leo as well. Interesting. Christy, my dear, we need to talk about what it means to have a full moon in your chart, especially to have the moon ruling your chart and the moon to be in this dramatic fire sign of Leo. So having a Cancer ascendant naturally makes you more sensitive, Christy, because all water signs are inherently more sensitive. However, having the moon ruling your chart and the moon being in her fullness during the time of your birth gives you a double whammy of that emotion, because the moon is at kind of full power, is a good way to say it. And where in the chart is she in full power, ruling your chart? She is in the second house of finance, of wealth, of resources. But what's interesting about this, and what's interesting about your chart, Christy, is you have the full moon in Leo, which means that the moon is being ruled by the sun in her fullness. So this is actually a very nice full moon formation, and it's happening on the second 8th house axis, which is a very important concept in your life and in your chart. So when we talk about the second house as representing wealth, and you putting your chart ruler here, money is going to be a big topic in your life. Yeah, it's also going to be something, because your moon is here, that you put a lot of emotional attachment into. So if for some reason your heart's going all over the place, I would highly recommend you double down on the security of your financial assets. Yeah, your bank account, because if your bank account hits 0, your emotions will also hit 0. And likewise, if your bank account skyrockets and you're able to do financial saving practices, there is an idea of your finances lifting your spirits as well. However, having the sun ruling the moon and in a full moon position between the 2nd and the 8th, the 8th house is the opposite of the 2nd, because it does rule other people's money. It rules topics like business, like death, like inheritance. The idea of when somebody passes away, how their resources are allocated, or the financial aspects that we can't necessarily see or control. And you've put your sun here ruling your moon, and that creates a very powerful dynamic with your chart and gives you a lot of entrepreneurial blood in your veins. Who's ruling the sun? The sun in Aquarius, Mercury in Aquarius is ruled by Saturn and Scorpio down in the 5th. That's interesting. So we have, and then this Uranus and Sagittarius in the 6th house of work. Not in trine, unfortunately. In sextile to the sun. Okay, we see that. We see that. There is a connection with you going into business with your spouse. Jupiter in Capricorn is ruling the Uranus in Sagittarius in your 6th. But how you choose to exercise these financial and these work placements, I don't like to see Uranus in the 6th house, because Uranus is that planet of unpredictability. It's that planet of dramatic change, and to have that in the workflow, it's something that I don't really enjoy seeing. Although having a Cancer ascendant, one of the things that Cancer is often overlooked for property-wise, everybody's like, oh, well, Cancer is just this emotional bag of tears waiting to explode. And don't get me wrong, we are. But at the same time, from a Cancerian perspective, Cancerian is second only to Virgo in its ability to clean up a mess. Yeah? Cancer is very much about damage control. And although Virgo does take the cake in terms of just that ability to walk into a room and fix, Cancer is very fixy, and to have that on your ascendant and to put Uranus in your 6th, there's this flavor that's developing that I'm seeing in your chart about you being that person that everybody goes to when the mess is created, and you actually potentially making a good name for yourself as somebody who is a fixer, or who somebody who wrangles that unwranglable horse, and that Sagittarius energy, that all over the place spunky firework energy, and really is able to quell or calm or manage that space. And you potentially even working in a consulting capacity or a financial capacity or an auditing capacity because of that sun in Aquarius ruling the moon from the 8th. Also, I always love people who work with numbers, money, and finance having a Mercury in Aquarius. It really does give you that digitized sense of mental technology. Let's see, what else do you want to talk about? There's an interesting formation between your Venus and your Mars. Your Venus and your Mars are conjoined by 1 degree apart. Mars is at 2 in Aries, Venus is at 3 in Aries, up in the 10th house of success. This is interesting because Mars in Aries is a very combative placement. It's a very warlord placement. It's a very take no prisoners, execute, drive, do placement. However, to have Venus in the same space, in her fall, in a sign she does not approve of, Aries, Mars rules Aries, and Venus is the opposite energetically of Mars. And to have her very close to Mars in a sign she doesn't like, it's kind of like Venus is this damsel in distress being swept away by this Mars in Aries. She is a prisoner of war. And Venus ruling your 11th house of friendships as well as your 4th house of family. It would not surprise me if these areas of life, your friendships and your family, are a detrimental aspect to you because you put so much energy in managing other people's resources that your social life and your personal life start to crumble because you are so overly aggressive with your pursuit of work endeavors and those things that don't necessarily have a soul. That's something that's really interesting about the 2nd and the 8th house is, although a lot of people strive for money and although a lot of people strive for resources and managing those invisible resources, they're just numbers on paper. They have no life of their own. Their energy that's supposed to be directed with a being behind it, an intention behind it, but you've decided to kind of crush or minimize the human element in your chart. And that's often somebody that we see with this Aquarius sun, the idea of overly distancing oneself and becoming a little bit too robotic. So that's just something to be aware of in your pursuit of all of this career tactics. Yeah, we need to balance that with a little bit of the friendship dynamic, and I think putting your North Node in Taurus in the 11th house of friendship is a good way to remind you that the people element of your life will be a far more important theme as you continue to grow, but we might need to work with that peopling theme a little bit closer, and we might need to work one-on-one on some Venus remediation for that specifically, because we need some of those soft edges as you're dealing with this full moon in Leo, Mars in Aries, Uranus in Sag, like all these aggressive fiery placements in your chart. Okay. Cool. Good morning, everybody jumping on. Thank you so much for joining me for another round of the Astro-Babble. We're on chart number 3. Let's talk about Ideen. She was born 5:50 p.m. in Dublin. Another Cancer ascendant, lovely. This time the moon is in Aquarius in the 8th, so this is really interesting. Yeah. So in the previous chart we had the ruler of the chart also being the moon, but the moon was in the 2nd house of finance and wealth. This time the moon is in the 8th house, the opposite house, that business entrepreneurship house. Yeah. And the moon is not necessarily in a full capacity. She is waxing, but she's only half full. So the emotional component of the chart is dialed down. Also having the moon in Aquarius, that emotionally distant sign, does give a little bit more of an emotional detachment to Ideen. She's able to look at things a little bit more rationally, a little bit more calmly, a little bit more removed. In fact, apathy might be something that she actually struggles with, because it's very easy for her to distance and shrug things off and not necessarily integrate the wetness of that moon, because it's in that dry, fixed air sign, being ruled by Saturn, which is always a little bit complicated. Then we have this Sun and Mercury retrograde in Sag and South Node in Sag in the 6th house of work. But then the North Node, Ideen, tricky. Co-present Venus and Mars as well. This time they're both in Capricorn. It's so interesting when I compare these charts back to back, the second chart and the third chart. They have similar energies, but the expression of these placements completely different. Venus and Mars are co-present, but this time Mars is in exaltation in an Earth sign, which is far more favorable to Venus, and she's not being controlled by Mars like she was in the last chart of success. This time, Mars and Venus are in the 7th house of relationships, meaning that this Venus-Mars expression is actually going to be much healthier, and is also ruled by Saturn, just like her moon. So we really need to look at the Saturn placement to receive a lot more information about this chart. And we see that the Saturn is in Pisces in the 9th house of higher learning, spirituality, travel, foreigners. I think that there is a really strong dynamic in the chart of not just having a spouse who has these qualities, but also having a deep emotional enjoyment of the spiritual realm, despite there being so much rationality in the chart. You know, Saturn ruling the ruler does bring this, normally this fierce dryness, this stubborn sense of this is the way it is. But Ideen's put her Saturn in Pisces, very wishy-washy sign. Every time that we would go to the dryness in her chart, she's counterbalanced it with the wetness. This Cancer ascendant has this moon in Aquarius, which would naturally be very, very dry, but she's put the ruler of that moon as Saturn in a water sign, and so there's this constant kind of ebb and flow in the chart, which I find very, very nice. But the topics of the 9th house, travel, foreigners, higher education, will be very emotionally drawing to Ideen. She won't necessarily work in those fields, but it is something that will be very emotionally calming to her. Instead, we have a lot happening in the workspace. We have a lot happening, not like the previous chart where it was all about climbing the ladder. This time it's actually about descending the ladder. Ideen is actually throwing out the 6th house. She's put her South Node here. She's decided that this time it's not about working hard, it's about working on healing. This North Node in Gemini in the 12th house of karmic healing, prisons, jails, retreats, hidden enemies. It's a house that's very much about personal growth, often through very dark and shadowy means. She's also put Jupiter in Gemini retrograde here. There's so much happening in Ideen's chart that creates this releasing of the need to be a workhorse, and this more kind of pursuing of passion, pursuing of the things that are actually going to evolve her spirit, as opposed to this 6th house of lowly work and daily tasks, which really does not have the importance in Ideen's life. She has her sun in Sagittarius here, which means that she will always be very charismatic in her workplace. She will always be very jubilant in her place of work. However, having this Jupiter and North Node in the 12th house of healing, of karmic work, and kind of the deeper shadowy side of the situation, I think Ideen has chosen this time around to not necessarily pursue what everybody else is pursuing, but instead to dig deep into the shadow world and to really start to chew on what her karmic lessons are this time around. Let's see. So we have this Venus and Mars in Capricorn in the 7th, being ruled by this Saturn in Pisces. You know, marrying a skeptic, Ideen, like, that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, we need to recognize that whereas they might be a little bit stricter and not give as much leeway, you know, your chart really speaks towards embracing the unseen and the unknown. You know, that's a really good caption for your chart. So although you're naturally attracted to somebody who has a fiercer sense of stubbornness and rationality than you do, you know, and they're less likely to budge, but you specifically have learned how to soften your edges. And I think that one of the major lessons that you'll start to appreciate as you work into any relationship is really starting to unpack the idea of your partner's strictness and your partner's rigidity, with Venus and Mars being in Capricorn, is actually yours to dissolve. As you start to break down your own walls and barriers and start to navigate into this 12th house of healing, you know, there's going to be this idea of you attracting a partner who specifically needs that lesson as well, and you softening their edges as you have learned to soften your own. Let's see. There are markers for teaching. It's just a little bit complicated because, again, if you're not coming from a place of healing, if you're not really focused on what's behind the lesson, yeah, then the lesson itself will fail. Like, you have the traditional rulership of a teacher. Like, you have Mercury ruling your 3rd house of teaching and communication, and also, you know, your 12th house of healing, but Jupiter swings through and rules that Mercury, which is retrograde, and starts to say, hey, look, I know that you can talk words, I know that you can regurgitate a lesson, I know that you can fill out a Scantron, I know that you can copy the text in a book, but that doesn't mean that you learned anything. Yeah, and so Ideen, specifically, if you do start to work on that 6th house and start to find yourself in a teaching position, really make sure that you understand that we're not looking for the copycat approach. We don't want them to just mimic, we want them to learn, and that learning process is really going to be deeper and more intense than often is presented at the surface. Yes. Okay. Cool. Thank you, my dear, for donating your chart, and we will keep moving down the line. We are on chart number 4 with Maria. Maria, darling, born at 9:35 a.m. in St. Paul. Let's take a peek at Maria's chart. So we have the ascendant in Gemini. Gives a nice airy flair to the chart. But then we have Pisces ruling both the Sun and Mercury, the ruler of the chart, in the 10th house of success. So when we find the ruler of the chart in the 10th house of success, we know that this person is very driven. We know that this person has their eye on the prize. We know that they may even have multiple brushes with fame in their early life. And especially, oh, Maria, darling, oh, honey, we need to talk about this. This is ridiculous. This moon in Scorpio conjunct Uranus in the 6th house of work, making a trine to your ruler in Pisces. You just got so much more interesting. Oh, wow. I'm a fan, Maria. I'm a huge fan. Huge fan. Putting your moon in Scorpio in the 6th is a bold move, as well as Uranus in Scorpio. We already talked about Uranus in the 6th house. I don't like it because it's unpredictable. But this Uranus in Scorpio retrograde in the 6th, you've decided to dive into secrets, Maria. That's the work that you've chosen to do this go around. It doesn't matter if you're a customer service representative sitting at a cubicle. Your passion and your knack and your talent and your desire is to sink your teeth into the secrets of those around you in the workplace, which often leads to a very unstable workplace, Maria, so we need to make sure that we're not activating tripwires at the same time as you're using that Scorpio moon to investigate the 6th. Also, work tends to be a little bit difficult. The moon is in her detriment here. She does not necessarily like to be in Scorpio. It's a little bit too dark, a little bit too watery. And you already have so much water in the chart, but you do have this intellectual air side of you that I think is smart enough to know how to balance it. You know, having a Mercury in Pisces just just inside that combustion with the sun, I think communication is something that's a little bit difficult. You would much rather empathically feel your way through life than actually verbally communicate, and it may be difficult, or you may have multiple snafus of speaking in public, and or your emotions getting the best of you. Like you write out the speech, you practice it, and then you just burst into tears the minute that the words start falling out of your mouth. Hence, I mean, that's just trials of a water sign. I get it. But also having your moon and Uranus in a very strong trine to Mercury and Pisces, I think that one of the issues that you need to learn how to mitigate is your emotional strength. It is a tool that is very, very valuable for you, but emotions often go unspoken, and that's where they like to be. Emotions prefer to be felt, not talked about. Yeah? The minute that we try to take that watery, dense, fluid energy of the heart and we try to transmute it into the voice, something gets lost in translation. But you're actually quite good at translating those things if you're able to master your own emotional state. So we might need to work on that a little bit, and have you learn how to be a little bit of a waterbender, and manipulate these placements a little bit more strategically, which I think you would find fun and entertaining. So let's maybe work together on that. Having other things, North Node and Libra, ruled by Venus. Yeah, I think one of the other things that you're going to need to learn how to balance is personal life and fun. The idea of the 5th house of children and creativity, and the 11th house of social groups and tribes. There's a little bit of conflict here, Maria. And I say a little bit of conflict, I mean kind of a lot of conflict. Venus is in her fall in Aries, can join the South Node in the 11th, whereas the North Node, which Venus is ruling, the North Node in Libra, is in the 5th, along with Pluto in Libra retrograde in the 5th. We have so much happening between your personal life and your fun, your social life, and they're often in great amount of conflict. But the way that you can sort of surpass that conflict and work to mediate that conflict is actually through the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education. There's something magic about planning a trip that really speaks to your chart very, very well. If you put it on the schedule in advance, if you carve out that time, then nobody can say no to you because you warned them half a year in advance, right? But then also, if that trip, if that travel, if that fun, yeah, but also if that family bonding occurs in an educational context of culture, of worldliness, of pursuing self-advancement, that can also give you an excuse to help bridge the two worlds together, or take children onto the trip with you, or leave them at home, but really understand that what you're doing is for self-development and not for selfish purposes. Yeah, that's kind of the issue with Venus in detriment in the 11th, is you often find that, when you're with friends, it often turns into this competitive match because you have this misplaced aggression, because you feel like you really should be home with the kids, or really should be kind of cultivating your own creative side in an isolated environment, and you shouldn't be out having fun. And that's a misconception, but at the same time, it's your feelings, it's your thoughts, and we need to learn how to work with them. And you kind of circumventing those things by incorporating the education and the travel portion, I think, is how we remediate that. But yeah, 7th house Neptune and Sag, you will be naturally attracted to the idealist, somebody who also maybe might have quite the past on them, Maria. Just because somebody is positive in mind does not mean that they are positive in action. I would like you to remember that. Just because somebody is able to weave a good illusion does not mean that they have any experience with the truth. So that is the final kind of bit that I would like to leave you with, my dear. Thank you, Maria, for donating your chart. Thanks, Maria. You're a fan too. I love it. Okay, so we are halfway through our charts. Just as a reminder, if you have friends or family that would like to be a part of the live stream, just private message me their birth date, place, and exact birth time. I will add you or them to the queue. I've gotten this question multiple times before. I do read for children. We have had multiple children's charts. If they are over the age of 13, I would and they're able to kind of get what's happening, I would ask their permission and not just like give me their information, because it is, they're at that age where opinions of other people matter and that kind of stuff. But yes, I would like to read for more people. Just private message me their info. If you would like to work one-on-one privately, just send me a message via my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, or if you're interested in learning astrology, we can work one-on-one that way too via my website. Okay, chart number 5. Let's talk about Lorena. Lorena was born 7:16 p.m. in Kamloops. Let's take a peek. Oh, Capricorn stellium. Lovely. So we have the ascendant in Leo, which gives this dramatic flair. Ooh, and a moon in Aries. She's got double fire in the chart, which is tempered by this Capricorn stellium in the 6th. Putting the ruler of the chart in the 6th, this seems to be the theme. Every live stream that I do, there always seems to be a common thread of the charts, and this time it's work, it seems. The 6th house is getting lit up in these charts very, very strongly. So we have Leo on the ascendant. The Sun is in Capricorn. Jupiter is also in Capricorn. North Node, Mercury, Venus, all in Capricorn in the 6th house of work. Placing the ruler of the chart, the Sun, in the 6th house of work does make you a little bit of a workaholic, Lorena. I'm not mad about it, because Capricorn knows how to be, a slave driver, and that's definitely something that, what people don't, and this is something that I think you need to hear, what people don't understand about Capricorn is they think that Capricorns are really strict and stern and mean, but what they don't get is that you're twice as hard on yourself as you are on other people. So they're actually getting the soft end of the stick, and they don't realize it. And especially with your Leo and Aries, this can often come off in a little bit more of an aggressive way with those fiery placements. When we mix fire and earth, we get that explosive kind of lava that both buries and sears, and that can be difficult, especially in early life, to balance. But you have natural leadership qualities. I mean, to put such a bold move to put so many planets in Capricorn in the 6th, and to put the North Node here, there's a clear direction in the chart of you needing to be the master of your own domain, you needing to be in control, you needing to understand what it's like to wield power, what it's like to specifically manage others, what it's like to be seen and witnessed for your own strength. And to also work on all those Capricornian lessons of toughening your skin and being impervious to superficial blows, and to kind of don your armor, and really work with those kinds of concepts for sure. We do have a little bit of an issue because this moon in Aries is making a square to Jupiter, and going to oppose your natal Uranus and Libra in the 3rd. So I think. Oh, and there's a lot happening. Just thinking about what's happening right now transit-wise, we have Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn about to re-retrograde into Capricorn, all through your 6th house of work. Like, you thought things were actually getting better. Unfortunately, they're going to get worse until around December 19th in the workspace, Lorena. So if you're in between jobs, or if you're looking for another job, or if stuff's going down in the work environment, unfortunately, the news isn't great. It's not going to get better until December. So if you can just ride the wave and hold on, I think that's going to be just the lesson. In fact, one of the things that I would like to encourage you to do, because this moon in Aries in the 9th is so much about learning and higher development, but it is in contrast with this Jupiter in Capricorn. Your work will constantly try to say, this is where you're at. Jupiter in Capricorn is a great metaphor for this planetary placement, is the glass ceiling. Yeah, the ceiling is high, it's above us. Yeah, and we can see through it, but it's still a cap. And it gives us the illusion of being free when we're not really free. Jupiter is the planet of expansion, but in Capricorn, he's in his detriment, the sign that he doesn't like to be in. And so that expansive principle is withdrawn. Yeah? So we think that we have power. We think that we have authority, when really we're just being trapped in a pretty cage. Yeah? Just because the cage is glittered with gold doesn't mean that we own that gold. Yeah, and that's part of the Scorpio stellium. Ooh, I can feel you energetically resonating with that. That's powerful stuff for you. But the way that we break through that is this moon in Aries in the 9th. And this moon in Aries in the 9th for the next 6 months is going to get some serious boosting as Mars transits through Aries in your 9th house and lights up this 9th house of higher education. And I'd really like you to constantly be learning. I'd really like you to constantly be activating your creative side. I'd like you to constantly be pursuing new heights, potentially looking at work overseas. Especially, I think that would be excellent for you. With this moon, or working with other cultures. If you feel like you're not moving forward, or you don't have access to the power that you would like, and this Capricorn side of you starts to get really antsy or itchy, we need to activate this moon in Aries in the 9th and really start to unpack what it means to go back to school, take a certification course, get another piece of paper, update your resume, look for other opportunities. It's one of the things about Capricorn is that it's slow and steady wins the race, and I get this, but when it comes to lifting your spirits, that can often be a short-term theme. Yeah? Something that we need to lift us out of this holding pattern emotionally. And one of the easiest things for you to do, update your resume and post it, apply to different jobs. Yeah? See who's looking, see what's out there, see if you can't get another company to accept you as a hire for a higher price point, often at a level of higher authority. That can be a really fun exercise for you to jump in the professional world without necessarily needing to leave your current company and get that emotional boost. You don't need to accept the position, yeah, but just the idea of validating this Aries moon and this Capricorn sun at the same time by looking for those opportunities while you're still stable in your fixed profession, that can be a fun little experiment. Yeah, I know you think your work friends are your friends, and I know it's easy for you to make friends at work, but let me tell you that they're not the best people for you to be associating with. I'd like you to reach higher. I'd like you to network up, is a good way to say it, because if you're playing with people at your own level, honey, then, and you're truly the summary of the top 5 of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, we need to get you evolving socially in order to evolve professionally, and that's another theme. So if your friendship circle is a little stale, or you keep going out to drinks with people from work and you're like, why is my profession not going anywhere? Stop spending time with the people who are at your level and elevate yourself to the people who are a little bit higher on the spectrum than you are, and that will start to get your thoughts turning in a different way. That could also be consuming different forms of media, but again, those higher education opportunities of how you want to progress, listen to people who have already progressed, and then work backwards from there. Excellent. Okay, that's all I have to say about that chart. Thank you, everybody. I'm seeing your messages. Thank you so much for sending them. I will respond to them once I'm done. Let's talk about Joe. So Joe was born 5 a.m. in Portsmouth. Let's take a peek. Joe. Frickin' triple fire sign. Crazy. With the moon applying to a trine to Mars and Leo in the 1st house. Girl, I'm done with you before we even got started. The moon... Oh, goodness, honey. All of this heat. All of this fire. All of this action. All of this drama. It's like freaking Fantasia 24/7. Ascendant Leo, Mars Leo, Sun Leo. Moon and Sagittarius in the 5th making a trine to all of that nonsense. So much heat! So much heat! Why the heat? I must know. Why is everything so... Oh, but then you have this really rational, down-to-earth, practical Venus or Mercury in Virgo in the 2nd house of finance. Like, you got this level head. Okay, I see it, but even in his exaltation, Mercury in Virgo in the 2nd house of finance is not strong enough to combat all of this heat. Absolutely ridiculous. So much fire in your chart, honey. We do have this Venus in Libra in the 3rd, which is nice. Your voice comes off very pleasant. But this Uranus in Libra and Jupiter in Libra, okay. You get away with a lot of stuff, Joe. You get away with a lot of stuff. That Venus in Libra ruling Jupiter in the 3rd, you can sweet talk your way out of any situation, and I'm mad about it. It's not fair, Joe. You've got silver tongue advantage in your chart for sure. Especially with that Mercury in Virgo. Tricky. But I like it. Okay. So the ruler of your chart in the 1st, I mean, like, you have such a strong personality. It's just so exalted. It's overly strong. Yeah. Phenomenal cosmic power, as Genie would say from Aladdin. You know, that's very much what your chart to me represents, and what you kind of came in with tool-wise. However, you know, you're really here to learn how to tone it down. Yeah, I see it. You're really here to learn how to tone it down. Venus in Libra ruling this Saturn in Taurus in the 10th. Jupiter in Libra ruling this North Node in the 8th. Yeah, you're here to learn how to channel that fire, for sure. That fire, you know, fire can do some really amazing things, Joe. It can cook stuff. Yeah, at a high enough temperature, it can melt the earth. Yeah, it can forge. And that's what I think you're here to learn how to do, is forge. But the flame can't burn wild and out of control, Joe. It just can't. It's unharnessed. It has no rules, no boundaries, no restriction, no legislation to keep it in place. But when a fire is told what it can and cannot do, it can hyper-focus into a singular beam, and when it focuses, it can increase its intensity and temperature and start to mold and start to shape and start to turn things that were solid into things that were liquid. Yeah? And then those things that were solid then become liquid underneath your hands, but then the minute that you leave them and remove your attention, they re-solidify into a new form that can be wielded and utilized strategically. And I think that you're in the process of learning how to do that, which may be exceedingly frustrating, because it seems like you've got the mind for it, and you've got the energy and the aura for it, but if the fire keeps blowing up in your face, and you keep wondering why you're getting burned by your own heat, and you keep exploding emotionally over every little situation, 1, it's because your boundaries have been compromised. 2, it's because your rules have not been predefined. And 3, it's often because the influences around you are flaming your fire as opposed to helping you to control it. So there are several things that we could work with in this chart to help you understand about working towards this Saturn and North Node in the higher aspects of your chart. But at the same time, I really need to make sure, first and foremost, that this fire isn't getting the best of you. And I'm sure it did when you were younger, and I'm sure that you were very explosive, you know, and this fire really started to enrage and hurt potentially other people. But as you get older, we need to start to soften that, focus it, put some rules around it, build a hearth around it, and get it to burn at such an intensity that we actually pole vault into other areas of the chart. Specifically ones that revolve around the 10th of success, the 8th of business, and working towards potentially even speaking, teaching, or writing. Yes. Okay, Joe. Thank you for donating your chart. We have 2 more to go through. Let's talk about Paula. Paula, my dear. 11:30 p.m. in Limavady, I think. Let's take a peek. Ascendant in Sagittarius. There's that outward flare for the dramatic. Ruler of the chart is Jupiter in Taurus. Jupiter in Taurus being combusted by the Sun in the 6th house of work, with a Mercury retrograde in Taurus in the 6th. Honey, there's this stubbornness. You have a lot of Taurus energy in the chart. You know, there's the spunky Sag on the side, but when we look at the ruler of your chart being in Taurus in the 6th, and your Sun being in Taurus in the 6th, this workaholic, stubborn tendency will get the better of you. And it's not, flexibility is something that is an acquired skill, but it also takes practice. And unfortunately, you've put these placements in your chart that really lock down very, very hard a lot of your flexibility, mentally specifically. One of the lessons that I talked about before is the idea of you think you know better, Paula. This Mercury in Taurus retrograde always thinks it knows better in the 6th house of work, health, pets. It's such a personal groundedness. It's somebody who's just so firm in their convictions, is a good way to say it. Unfortunately, just because you know it to be true does not mean it's the actual truth. Yeah? Which is why you put this Venus in Gemini ruling your moon in Libra from the 7th. You have this partner, and you're attracted to this partner who's just always lovey and option-oriented. And I think that that's the perfect example of why you need somebody in your life to counterbalance your stubbornness. Your chart needs, craves, must have people, places, things around you to open you back up and remind you that there's more to the story. And have you considered this option? And what about this texture? And have you thought about it in this way? Let's spin you around and then look at this in the morning. It's the fixed placements in your chart are so headstrong, but your ability for partnership is also very strong. And I think one of the major lessons in your life and in your chart specifically is the more you're able to customize your team with specifically very airy, intellectual, option-oriented people who are always looking on the bright side but always using their intellect to reframe and reshape the situation. That's where your chart really, really thrives, for sure. This moon in Libra ruling the North Node in Cancer in the 8th. I actually would like you to potentially work in a team dynamic. For sure, I'd like you to maybe even start a business with a spouse where you are able to corral large groups of people and manage them kind of like, I hate to say this, Paula, because I'm not really a fan of this structure, but you'll understand what I say when I say it. You'd be very good at MLM, multi-level marketing. Yeah, because you'll know the product inside and out with this Mercury and Taurus retrograde, like the finer details and the selling points, like you'd memorize them in 2 seconds flat. This Venus in Gemini ruling the 6th of work, like and ruling this moon in Libra, the idea of your chart specifically, Paula, having this synastry with large groups and having this ability to form these tight-knit relationships which then work in your favor, that would just be an excellent, like, you'd just be good at it. Yeah, for sure. We do have this Saturn in Pisces in the 4th house, kind of hidden, tucked away. She's important because she's ruled by the ruler in Pisces. But to have Saturn in Pisces in the first couple degrees in the 4th house, I'm suspicious of it, Paula. I'm suspicious of this home life of yours. Both you growing up as well as the current home that you develop now, there's a stability with Saturn. Yeah, but Saturn is in Pisces, which is the most mutable water sign that we have, so it's kind of swampy, would be a good way to say it. The energy is emotional, but the energy is also fickle. And there's this love with conditions in the 4th house that I think also, oh, that's where that is. Oh, honey, I'm about to drop a bomb on you. Okay, here we go. Yes, this is it. Okay. You learned from your family that love is conditional. And you learned in work that effort is also conditional. The more you work, the more success you have. It's that simple. However, where your chart is pulling you is the idea of unconditional love. Where your chart is pulling you is into the 7th and the 11th houses, which can then be monetized and activated by the 8th, where people know, like, and trust you and love you because of who you are as a person. And they really don't care about receiving stuff in return, and you kind of trust falling into that process despite being conditioned otherwise. Like, you're always looking for the traps, honey. You're always worried and walking on eggshells and trying to see what the angle is. And then, unfortunately, you meet somebody like me, and you're like, wow, this person is just kind of doing to do. And these other people in your life, like your spouse, just giving to give, loving to love, having to have, not necessarily with any particular attachment to the process, just allowing and being allowed to freely flex the compassionate muscles of the spirit. Like, you're here to learn how to do that. And then once you trust and once you fall into that ability to love without condition and be taught by the people around you and the people you hold dear that love is not something you need to fight for, it's something that you are naturally entitled to as a being on this earth that is supported by the universe, then we access this Mars and Aries in the 5th, this power, this strength, this ability to create, to forge, but only after you surrender some of this goddamn stubbornness. Yeah? Okay. Love you, Paula. Absolutely love you. Okay, so let's take our last chart. Got about 5 minutes. Let's talk about Delphi. I know you've been waiting. I know it. Excited to unpack a fellow Scorpio rising. So we have 11:33 a.m. in Lake Forest as the birth time. We have Scorpio rising, Uranus in Scorpio, and a Venus in Scorpio, all in the 1st house of self. In case you know a little bit of astrology, this is whole sign, so we're not using the ascendant as the 1st house marker. We're using a 0-degree Scorpio starting point, so that puts Venus and Uranus in the 1st house, which I think you'll find interesting because they're much more a part of you than I think you think they are. And likewise, this Pluto in Libra and Mars in Libra being ruled by Venus, also not as much a part of you as you think they are. They're much more hidden. So, the ruler of your chart is this Mars in Libra in the 12th. I don't like the idea of putting the ruler of the chart in the 12th house of hidden enemies, jails, retreats, hospitalizations, karmic healing. It's a very difficult place for the soul to flourish. Like you've thrown your spirit into the mud. Your self-esteem is that lotus bud at the base in the muck of the pond. Now, Scorpio is uniquely qualified to navigate this environment, especially having Venus in Scorpio here. Hon, you know how to play in the dirt. You really do. However, having this Mars in Libra, I think the issue is, where do I start? Where do I begin? And the answer isn't where, the answer is just yes. The answer is just start. Yeah, especially with this Mercury in Virgo so highly placed in your chart in the 11th house. You know, the idea of you specifically wondering over and over analyzing, analysis paralysis, out the MF wazoo, like you are so prone to this idea of indecision. And we need to consider less options and just close your eyes, point to a direction on the board, and go forward. And then what happens, interestingly enough, is when you go forward off of this randomly chosen option, your heart, your spirit will then say, no, this actually isn't the right option. I actually need to be over here because of the contrast. The contrast will clarify, but if you don't act, you don't get the contrast, which won't lead to the clarity. We see it? Okay. And this is also where the struggle with the emotions comes in, unfortunately, because we've got this Mars in Libra ruling the Moon in Aries in the 6th house. You know, tapping into the healing world and tapping into the idea, oh, unfortunately, oh goodness, I'm over my hour, Delphi, and I know you're watching through Instagram. Check the Facebook or the YouTube replay for the full rest of the reading, because I've got about 15 seconds left on Instagram, but I'm going to keep going. So the idea of this 6th house in Aries in 6th house Moon in Aries, you know, it does give you a little bit more drive. It does give you a little bit more passion to work, to strive, that work ethic to kind of pull yourself out of the mud. And I do enjoy that. But again, because it's ruled by a detrimental Mars, I really want you to remember that it's not about doing the right thing. It's about doing a thing, anything to get you going, to get that momentum. Because if you don't do the thing, then you won't figure out what thing to do in the long run. Yeah, these are all short-term games, right? Scorpio's a little bit more focused on the long term, but it's crippled by its immediate need for sensitivity management. Scorpio needs to be soothed on a regular basis. It can't hold on to that poison forever. And a lot of your placements are very, very quick, but we need to make sure that you're aware of the long-term game, not just the short-term, oh, I've had this idea, let me run with it for 2 seconds, no, I don't like it, crap, I failed. No, the failure is an opportunity for course correction, honey. And in fact, this Jupiter in Leo in the 10th house, ruled by your Sun in Virgo, like, you're here to work with the masses. You're here to work with this 11th house of tribes and communities. Like, you've always been very gravitational towards the large groups, and performance magic would be a good way to say it. Especially with that Mercury. I'm very suspicious, but also loving of this Mercury in Virgo in the 11th, because it's somebody who can manipulate crowds very, very well. Especially that Pied Piper energy would be a good archetype to embody or to make as a frame of reference for this Mercury in Virgo in the 11th. But the Sun in Virgo ruling this Jupiter in Leo in the 10th, I mean, Jupiter is our most positive planet, and to put Jupiter being ruled by the Sun in the 10th, like, it's this magic of success when it comes to you and crowds. And crowds are also a great way to figure out if something works. You know, if you're ever wondering, my good sir, whether or not something is worth pursuing, throw it out on social media. In fact, as an example, these Astro-Babbles are a social media fluke. Mid-quarantine, I basically said, hey, I know a lot about astrology. I I've got nothing better to do. Who wants me to get free readings in order to make sure that I don't go to mentally hell in a handbasket because I'm literally just in my condo alone for going on a month now? And everybody literally jumped on and started submitting birth times, and now I'm a couple months in and my business is thriving with consultations. Like, everybody's really enjoying it, tons of thank you notes, and I know I'm on the right path because everybody is supporting it collectively, including yourself, and thank you. But that's very much what I'd like you to see. I don't want you to be trapped in the world of indecision. I don't want you to be walking on eggshells because you think that you have the capability of doing things the wrong way. Yeah? Worst case scenario, you do it the wrong way. People don't respond, or maybe you get a few negative comments, or maybe people are confused because they're like, where did this come from? But you know, based on that feedback, based on that response, that you just go in the opposite direction. Yeah, it's really that simple. And to have so much power in the North Node, in this 11th house of tribes, of groups, of communities, you're really here to work with the people. Yeah? And that can also be one of the reasons why you chose to compromise your ego and your identity by putting your chart ruler in the 12th. Also co-present with Pluto. So the minute that you hit 50, all of that power that you've been banking on will be yours and will come in flooding, because you just won't give a crap anymore, and you'll realize that you did all of this strategically and intentionally. And the shackles, the weighted anklets that you've been trudging along with will mysteriously fall off, and you will no longer give two flying Fs what other people think. So I think with your chart specifically, I would really, really make sure that play in the darkness. Like, have fun with the spiritual world. Have fun with all of these things, all of these topics that you're interested in. Nourish your spirit, which needs to be nourished. But understand that one of the big things is the reason why people trust you is because they see how compromised you are. And putting your Lord in the 12th is 100% compromising, as well as I would also say that putting Scorpio on the Ascendant is very compromising, because it makes you defensive, it makes you vulnerable, it makes you a threatening non-threat, is a good way to say it, because people see your fangs, they see your tail, your spike, they see how dangerous you are, but they also recognize that you're a poor defenseless little bug. Yeah? And if you were this raging lion that could pounce on them at any minute and rip them limb from limb, then they wouldn't trust you as much. So you decided to make yourself small. Yeah? And that, I think, will work to your favor, in your advantage, as you start to remember to be humble, as you start to remember that it's really the crowd that you're following, it's really the people that you're pleasing, and as you start to build confidence, just remember that you've chosen to keep yourself small for a reason, as you attain power, to make sure that that power doesn't get misused, and you really turn it into the fullest expression of a Pluto in Libra, which is a balanced power, a compassionate power, a fair power, that's actually able to do far more healing than destruction. Excellent. Cool. Thank you, Delphi, for submitting your chart to science. Okay. Yes, go ahead, for all of you who came in a little bit late. I am doing these in order, so I messaged you this morning, letting you know where you were, but everything is recorded, so please feel free to go back and listen. Thank you, everybody, for joining me for the live stream. If you would like to work with me one-on-one, if you would like to learn astrology, visit my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. If you would like yourself or family members or friends to be featured on the live stream, the list is rather long, but I do these Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 charts at a time, so it does go by relatively quick. I will message you, just private message me birth date, birth time, and birthplace, and we will put their charts in the queue. But until next time, may the stars be ever in your favor.